Greetings. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our live talk with Wynton Marsalis. I'm sure you've enjoyed the Democracy Exclamation Point Suite presented by Jazz at Lincoln Center, the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra Septet with Wynton Marsalis. And we are here virtually. Mr. Marsalis will be joining us momentarily. My name is Maya Cunningham, and I'm a UMass Amherst ethnomusicologist. I'm also a doctoral student in the Afro-American Studies Department and a jazz vocalist. So while we are waiting for Mr. Marsalis, I'm just wondering if we could offer some, all right, we are waiting. We're here. We have Mr. Marsalis here. Everybody please give a virtual applause, and he will be with us momentarily. Yes, okay. Well, hello, Mr. Wynton Marsalis. How are you?
All right, now, how you doing, Maya?
Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday to you. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Good to see you too. That was very beautiful. I really enjoyed the Democracy Suite. Yes, yes. It was filled with joy, actually, which is very interesting.
Thank you. I'm very happy at your assessment that it had some joy and that it brought some joy. And I'm glad that you're not telling me you're sorry that you heard it.
But no, of course not. Of course not. It was very beautiful, creative work. So where shall we begin? We're in interesting times where questions of democracy are flying all over the news. And I wanted to start with the word democracy. Number one, I was just wondering why you seem to use language very intentionally in titling your works. And I'm just wondering why the Democracy Exclamation Point Suite.
Because I believe this is a time that requires that type of investment in the engagement part of democracy. And I feel that the democracy is a windy ledge that we can plant a flag on a mountain. And if we plant that flag, it requires us to be engaged with it, and for us to understand when we engage with it that it's going to cost us. That it's not free.
Okay. I think we will all agree with that. There's been some very interesting talks about which groups have really, struggled to bring about the full realization of democracy. And having said that, to me and to many, democracy is a very charged word, which for some people it represents American freedom, and to some people, to many, it represents American hypocrisy. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that, concerning the idea of democracy when it was supposedly born, and then how it actually didn't include groups like the Afro-descendants in the U.S. and Native Americans and so forth. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that it's naive and childish to feel that there was some zero sum that everything in the world started from, and everyone was equal. And that from that zero sum, there's a list of those who violate and those who don't violate. I feel if we look into our own personal lives, we will see times that we rose to ourselves and the other times that we did not. And the question of groups of people, difficult to define groups, the ideas of human injustice that stretch back to the beginning of any mythology that you want to pick. If you take the Judeo-Christian mythology, it can go back to Cain and Abel, and a sectarian past and tribalism, things that bring comfort to us on some level and also bring problems. We find this is a human issue. Democracy only has assured that you're not supposed to be killed for fighting for what you want to fight for. I say that by saying that if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong message, it doesn't really matter. So if you Medgar Evers was from Mississippi, Martin Luther King was from Alabama. Dr. King managed to live to be 38 years old with a message that was definitely not one that would lead you to believe you could hold on to your life for that long. Medgar Evers did not survive that.
So then, is it really naive and childish for folks who feel conflicted about the idea of democracy, considering, that Dr. King, Medgar Evers, and others were brutalized for fighting for true democracy for African Americans? Is that really naive and childish?
I think that democracy has to fight for itself in the world. It's not a
Mhm.
given.
Well, it actually, if we think about those who had full citizenship, at the onset of the country, those who wrote the Declaration of Independence, who were really including themselves in, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. They were really talking about themselves. They refer later in the document to, I'm going to quote, Indian savages. And of course, Black people were considered to be colonial property.
Right.
So I don't know, about that kind of word striking a chord with some as being naive and childish. I don't what.
I think that the part that I'm saying is naive and childish is not the words, but it's the thought that what I'm speaking of being childish is the thought that there's some zero sum in the world that we start from, a basic innocence of all groups of people, and from that innocence, the framers of the Constitution violated that innocence. My contention is that that's not what our study of the history of the world leads us to see and understand. So I'm speaking of a particular thing that is childish.
Hmm.
The naive part is when you think you can evoke some place in a world where there's not been bloodshed and death and exploitation of whoever the other group was. In this case, it happens to be Indians and Black Americans, Negroes at that time they were left out of the Constitution.
Hmm.
The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment attempted to address that by policy. However, it's very difficult to change the hearts and minds of people who are raised in a culture of prejudice and abuse of people for some reason. In this case, it happens to be color. In other cases, it's religion. In the cases where everybody is the same color, it can be wealth, tribe, markings. It can be things you don't even know what people are talking about. Uh, you wouldn't even be able to tell the difference. I'll never forget being in the home of a Japanese person and coming from the South and a lot of prejudice and ignorance, which is what I grew up with. I saw everything in the world as black and white. So to
Hmm.
be in a culture where there was not a black or a white person, first, it was very interesting. And it made me lose kind of my bearing for a second. But I remember talking to a Japanese friend of mine, and I said, man, it's interesting for me to come from such a place of such prejudice. I'm from Louisiana. I grew up in unbelievable segregation and ignorance and injustice. And to be here in a place where it's all people of another whole race and identity and culture, and just to be on the street, be the lone black person on a packed street. He said, oh, it's okay, man. We hate Koreans here.
Hmm.
Now, I'm not going to presume to speak for all Japanese. I'm only saying in this instance, for me, at 19 years old, in a person's house, this is what they told me.
Hmm.
Because the language that we use today actually is so charged that it prevents you from ever saying anything. Because every time you make a statement or you say something, now all of a sudden you're speaking for everybody. You don't have private opinions. You're saying it's a law that people have to be subject to. So when I'm speaking with you, I'm speaking purely from my experience. I
Hmm.
was there. This is what this man told me.
Hmm.
So I thought, wow, okay, y'all have a hatred for a group of people that at that time, I was very unsophisticated. It was hard for me to tell the difference between a Japanese and a Korean person because
Hmm.
that's not the prejudice we had. Oh,
Well, there's a parallel though in Japanese, Korean, and then the situation here with the different racial groups, if you want to call them. And no offense to anybody, I'm just stating from what I understand of history. Japan has a history of imperialism where they actually went and are kind of were spreading an empire that included Korea and China. I'm talking about World War II. And then you have here, Euro descendants who were establishing an imperial empire. So I think that, even though there might not be a black and white, and then I will also say to that there is this sense, just from what have learned from my travels in India and other places, that there is this kind of global premium on whiteness that does come from American empire. And so all of those kinds of things do strike and then the way democracy is used, particularly by the U.S. government, is it can be very there can be some erasure involved with that word.
well, I contend back to what I told you. Any, there's no one or the other. you could get rid of every person on earth, Maya. It could just be me and you left. There would be no less ignorance, prejudice, arrogance, abuse of power. Like
Well, that's true.
I tend to when people have been brutalized and dominated since the beginning of Earth, and I think that democracy gives us an opportunity to define ourselves by our largest possible group that includes us. So
Mm,
sometimes people give you a chance to define yourself by the largest group, but it can't include you. So you have to then commit an act of self-hatred, which Afro Americans had to do for for a lot of time and still do it. However, there is a when I go back to what I said, which I didn't mean it to be insulting to people who believe in these kind of things, about the kind of childishness is the thought that we have not inherited a world that has all kinds of behavior. Like there were white imperialists, there were white people who, and then there were white people who fought against that. There were white
mm,
people who gave their lives up. And when
mhm.
we look at everything as black and white, what do we say to these people who lost their lives? Well, you were a sucker. You shouldn't have given your life up for that. You should have just been in the white group because all of y'all are the same. Human life human beings are very complicated. You and I
Mhm.
are complicated.
Yes.
You know, I can't paint you with one brush and say you are this. Now, our government, of course, have done things that we don't like. But I will tell you from traveling around the world, talking to people in China, in Japan, in different countries, in Africa, in different European countries, people almost universally hate their governments. And when you get in their home and you talk with them, they almost always pulling their hair out about what the government did. So I think that we have to fight to define our way of life, and this way of life gives us the opportunity to do that. Doesn't mean we're going to be successful. In a lot of places, you don't have that opportunity.
Mm.
You know that's not available to you. So if you go to those places, you will understand what I'm telling you. You know,
Well, I mean, when you say opportunity, meaning certain freedoms that allow citizens or those who would be citizens to challenge the idea or to fight for democracy, is that what you
that's
mean?
right.
Okay.
Right. That's right. Without getting killed. Like if you just take what women did for to gain suffrage, it doesn't mean they weren't ridiculed, uh, subject to all kind of stuff, cheated out of stuff, have to deal with fake court cases, some gave their lives. But
Well,
those
right.
who fought for that right were able to be successful. And
Well,
with black people, it's been a much longer struggle.
yes.
It's been a struggle filled with injustice and all these different things, but we continue to fight those battles. And we should continue to fight them. But it's very much an American battle that also has many white allies and has had white allies since the beginning of that struggle.
Yes, yes, sir. I mean, we think about different abolitionists and that kind of thing, and those, but what you said without getting killed, and so I want to press in on that because we think about people like Medgar Evers, like Dr. King, like Fred Hampton, who there was a coordinated assassination of Fred
Sure,
Hampton by
sure,
the FBI with local police. So
sure.
I wonder, with those who really don't play along with the system, who really stand outside of it, there is a danger,
There always is, and some sacrifice their lives for in the cause of democracy.
yes.
Some did do that. However, all didn't do it. So you and I can still sit here and talk. Like let's remember, it's not a zero-sum game. It's like if King had been from Mississippi, he wouldn't have made it.
Right.
Like
Right. Sure.
that was the difference in those two cultures.
Sure.
And there was a time when we would think that lynching was just something that happened. Most lynching, of course, was over people trying to get equal wage. People wanting to be paid the same. It's still a battle
Mm-hmm.
for the union movement. A lot of times, blacks, we weren't even in enough position to fight in union battles. But let me tell you something: the people who got killed in the fight for the union, they were getting killed. When
Mm-hmm.
the railroads came in, the way different types of Americans were treated, there's a desire for peonage all over the world. And
Mm-hmm.
traditionally, if you're a person who didn't want to be a peon, you're going to risk your life. And
Sure.
some people survived and some did not. But in terms of the American identity and cultural identity, which is actually the only thing that I'm qualified to speak on with any level of authority, it has been a hybrid identity from the very beginning. And the attempt to segregate it it's too difficult. We're not going to be successful doing that.
Hybrid identity. What do you mean by that?
Well, the root of Afro-American music is Anglo-Celtic.
Oh boy, oh
And the
boy.
root of modern American music is Afro-American.
Okay, so I didn't know we were going to talk about that, but we may as well press in because I've heard you say that before, and I profoundly disagree, as do many of the musicians who created the music and the scholars. So, sir, why do you say that? It's I know you know. I'm sure you realize it's very controversial to say that the root of Afro-American music is Anglo-Celtic. So did the Africans who came to the U.S. just stop being African? Like
No.
how is that? What's your rationale in that? I'm just going to turn on this light. Folks who are joining us, I hope you're enjoying this conversation. But tell us.
Well, the only place you could play drums and traditional instruments in the United States was New Orleans, because it was French. So if you take the music, we don't have examples of, but the music that came from Congo Square, New Orleans music is closely akin to Caribbean music. It's not quite as African as Haitian music, and it's more like genteel Cuban music, not like the most deeply rooted African Cuban music. The African concept of playing in two times at once, out of two polarities, the Afro-American did not retain that. Now we still had elements of the two times, so it's closer to what an Irish jig is, because the Irish jig is in 2 and it's in 6, but the harmonic foundation is in 2. It's not in, if you're going the chord changes are going dum 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 dum. So in African music, in many of the traditional musics, you got to play in 4. They're playing in both of those polarities at one time. They're in 6 sometimes, and they're in 4. The Afro-American music dropped that way of playing, and it continued in a melodic vein, comes out of the pentatonic scale, which can be related to some African musics. I mean, Africa is a large continent with many different styles of music, but much more akin to things like Irish music and English music. The foundational elements of our music, the Negro spirituals, it's a hybrid combination of an African concept of pentatonics, an Asian concept of pentatonics, and the European pentatonic concept that you find in a lot of English hymns. Once Black people started to become Americanized, second, third, fourth generation people, their African retention was in timbre, that's in the sound of people's voices, in a ritualized kind of way of understanding the world that put everything together, in a way of call and response. This like a kind of just, it's a way, a process of doing things. And in some aspect of rhythm. It's not as much the aspect of rhythm as it's made out, because it's a cliche that, well, the Black part is the rhythm and the white part is harmonic. That's not necessarily true. So that's kind of what my understanding has led me to believe.
Okay, sir. Well, I just want to bring in, number one, I'll start with the voice of our esteemed professor who has passed away, Max Roach. And I just want to read something that he says here. I think that Black music is really African American. And this is the reason that our music is not fully recognized. And he goes on to talk about, he always spoke of Black American music as having an African antecedent, not an Anglo-Celtic antecedent. And there's lots of ethnographic information that has come from our ethnomusicologists and other scholars and musicians who talk about Africanity as, number one, Dr. Gregory Carr talks about Africanity as a way of being. So it's not just about isolating different kinds of retentions, but it's about Africans who came here and who continued their way of being, even generationally with their children. So we came from, maybe an inter-ethnic identity into an intra-ethnic identity, but that's evident in our language, and certainly evident in the music. There's another ethnomusicologist named Tom Torino who's done a lot of work in African-American music, but quite a lot of work in the African continent. And I find that he isolates these general principles of African music. And so it's not just about those layered rhythms, which come from a specific area, but he talks about buzzy timbres being African. So we think about a Coleman Hawkins saxophone. He's projecting an aesthetic that comes from our culture onto the instrument, or even the way a cyclical form, like with ostinato bass lines, or this cycle of choruses that go along, and specifically jazz, interlocking melodies, rhythms and harmonic patterns that function in an interlocking way. And then our conception of our conception of our compositional composition. So in excuse me, our compositional conception. So in some musics, a composition is a set piece, and if you don't play those notes with exactitude, then you are not playing that composition. But in the African way, just generally speaking, a composition is a theme that can be improvised on and is varied, and it's still that composition. And we see that and we see that in hand clap games, we see that in jazz, we see that in gospel music. So and one more little thing is I've noticed that there are a lot of folks who like to talk, they like to zero in on one particular tradition on the continent and say, well, because your music talking about African American music doesn't sound like that, it's not African. But we don't all come from the same place. There's no comparing African Americans to Afro Cubans is like, we have a huge Yoruba influence, but African Americans come from, 24% in Senegambia, 24% in Southeast Nigeria, a huge number of people in West Central Africa. And so we have a very different composite of Africans who came. So that's my response to you. I didn't know we were going to go there, but we went there. So
okay, let me say what I said again, because your response made it seem like you're saying something that's counterstating what I'm saying, but it's not. It never dawned on me that if I say the root of Afro-American music is Anglo-Celtic, it's interpreted meaning there's no African in it. It's Afro-American. So I'm assuming when I say the root of it is Anglo-Celtic, it's an assumption that it's Afro-American. So it has to be African. Okay, so I want to start there.
Okay, well, now, that's a heartening clarity.
I just take that. That's like I say, I'm from New Orleans. I'm a fan of what used to be the Oakland Raiders. I'm assuming I'm a fan of the New Orleans Saints. Maybe I'm wrong to assume it, but it's an assumption. So my assumption is, of course. Then I went on to explain that, yes, with timbre, you talked about the buzzy timbre. Timbrely, the way we do our call and response, the dance beats. No way in the world I'm going to take all the African out, because first, I'm proud of that element. I love that element. I've taken many arrows for defending that element. Okay. I wouldn't have had to be out here being slapped for years by the cultural elite, but for saying Afro-American music and bringing the actual Black, all those elements that you're talking about, standing by those elements. But it's not necessary for me to not recognize Anglo-Celtic music and an Anglo-Celtic root. It's just like basketball. James Naismith invented ball. Okay. But what Michael Jordan and them did with it, and what Bill Russell and them did, they did what they did. And the white ball players started to adapt to their way of playing. I said the root of Afro-American music is Anglo-Celtic. Then in the 20th century, the root of American music is Afro-American. You look at rock and roll, Afro-American root.
Yes.
Blues, Afro-American root.
Yes.
Jazz, Afro-American root.
Yes.
20th century classical music that sounds like American music, Afro-Celtic root. Afro-American root. So that's, now I'm not going to argue against myself.
Right.
Well, it's not African. Obviously, yes, there are these elements. However, I'll go back to what I said. America is hybrid. It's hard to hold on to cultural elements because everything also in America is commercialized. I've seen it in my life. Man, when I was growing up, everything was so segregated, it was clear what everything is. It's not that clear now as it was then, just with a language. If I try to imitate the way my great aunt spoke, that's not even possible. I couldn't even imitate it to you. She grew up on a plantation. She had a way of talking. I mean, now, of course, I understood everything she said. I lived with her for the year that I was 6. So it's like I was her son. I had no problem understanding her. But to recreate it for you, whoo. Now I talk to people on the phone. I have no idea what their identity is from a racial standpoint. There's, of course, a cliched way we hear each other, and we know we say this and we say that, but we don't really know. And it's fully accepted. It's an accepted form to call an American, an Italian, or a Greek. They're American. They come up with some invention. It's called American. Like, But what something a black person does is always is not American. It has to be Afro-American. Now, I'm all for that. Not like I've ever been unproud of black people or not loving of our history and struggle and travail in this country. My record is clear on that. We also live in a time where somebody could have given up everything but their life for something Afro-American and make a statement about something they don't like. And all of a sudden, that 40 years of dedication, that doesn't mean anything. Well, what do you mean by this statement? Because we also live in a time where actually being something is not as important as being called something.
Okay.
So, I understand that. But I feel like, why do people fight for equality? They fought for equality so that you could define yourself by the largest possible group that also includes your smaller groups.
And what is the name? Are you talking about a largest group as in American?
No. What's the largest group you can conceive of defining yourself in that includes you? Now, the reason I say that includes you is because you can fit into American a lot of times if you're black, if you just disavow everything that's in your tradition or your culture. I really like that guy. I've been given that opportunity many times.
Okay.
And with me, it starts with something like, well, we know you grew up playing classical music, which I don't take offense to it, but my daddy is a jazz musician. I didn't grow up playing classical music.
Right.
I grew up trying to play pop music, which was what everybody really played, that we played. Traditional New Orleans music that I was forced to learn. I didn't like the music. I'm from the hood. We didn't like that kind of music. We considered it being Uncle Tom and all that. New Orleans, we didn't want to do that. And kind of jazz that I like, my daddy didn't play, but I was so sad I couldn't consider myself a jazz musician. Then a guy came on a streetcar and walked in the back where white people never went and put his trumpet case back to mine. And to be honest, I was kind of irritated because I didn't want brothers to start messing with me from talking with him. And he gave me this record. I was 14, he was 19 or 20. It was a white dude record. Now remember, I grew up in segregation, so everything is white or black. So trumpet student, he said, man, listen to this record. And when I saw it was a classical record, I was disappointed. But I turned the record over and I read the liner notes just to be distracted and not engage with them and have brothers take both our horns. And I noticed, okay, this dude parents was coal miners. I said, man, somebody's a coal miner family, and from being a coal miner, he played classical music on a damn trumpet. I never even heard of playing classical music on a trumpet. I went home and put the record on. Man, this guy could play. I said, I wonder if I could learn how to play like that. Then I started to try to learn how to play like him. Now that is an Afro-American process. I don't have to deny this man, but when I'm asked questions, it's always, well, you started off playing classical music. No, I didn't start off playing it.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? So I'm aware of all the subtle ways that the Afro-American is always called upon to remove himself from the equation to be okay.
Right.
Okay. So I am not doing that. And I never do it. But your largest group that I'm asking you to reach for is, what is the largest group you can define yourself by that includes you?
Me?
A group that you can be a part of that doesn't require you to deny yourself or your identity or your race or your gender or your sexuality or whatever it is you believe yourself to be.
Okay.
So for me, that's human beings. That's the largest group I could find on earth.
Okay.
And that's who I want to be. I want to be a human being.
Okay.
Okay, I grew up being black. I grew up always being reduced to whatever my skin color was. And I hated people because their skin color was different from mine because they mess with us.
Well, okay. Let me ask this. There's one thing to see our blackness through the colonial gaze as difference. There's another thing to see our blackness as Afro-descendant. You know, so I think we use the word black, we're using the word Afro-descendant.
See, let's go to the DNA. The entire world is Afro-descendant.
Well, some people might agree with that. Some people might not.
That's science. I mean,
that might be true, but not here. In the United States, everybody is not Afro-descendant.
You know what? I'm gonna go with the science. I can't. First thing, I can't determine what everybody does. My dad used to always say, all of everybody never does anything.
Right.
But to my other point is when you get past kind of hatreds and whether they're justified or not. When you get past those things and get into the fact of the struggle we have on earth, it's going to take every human being on earth to make this not go a certain way.
Well, that's a good transition into a question I have about one of the songs, because you know, there seem to be some human beings, as we talked about before, who are invested injustice, and equality for all. And then there's some people who are just not. That's the term.
And let me say this. I don't mean to interrupt. I just want to say one thing. And there are some people that are invested in both. Let's never forget that. Let's
maybe
look into our own lives, you and I, where we've made decisions where we thought, damn, that was kind of stupid what I did. Or maybe you haven't done it. Okay, so I'm not going to speak for you, but I've definitely done things that was not what I was taught to do, what I thought, or even what I believed.
That's
I have
true.
done those things.
But the actions of an individual have a different implication than those of a nation state. And
Oh, really?
so let's press into sloganize, patronize, realize, revolutionize.
I like
Black
that.
Lives Matters. I have a question about the S, but I hear, and tell me if I'm wrong, I hear a melodicized version of the slogan as the melody. Am I wrong? Am I correct about that?
You're absolutely right. You
And
play
then,
that music. You're a musician.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts about the movement and why the S?
Well, I like the movement.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the mission statement that used to be up about it.
Okay.
They used to have in the mission statement for the organization. I definitely don't ascribe to that.
And what is that?
It's long. You got to read it.
Or some major points that just
I can't. You got to read it yourself. I used to tell people to read it. This goes back to when it started. So I definitely did not. However, let's take it for how it's used, because many things are used in public, and the fact of it is less important than the feeling of it.
Yes.
Generally, I try to avoid that. But for this talk, I'm going to say anything that is in favor of greater agency and equality, an agency for those who are denied that agency for their skin color, because they don't make money, because they don't, and anything that is against a sanctioned violence force being able to use violence as if they're criminals, I'm in favor of that.
Excellent.
Any act that is going in that direction, I'm in favor of it. Any law that's passed that changed it, any protest that's in favor, I'm in favor of that. Any person who speaks out in a barbershop, anybody who argues with family members, I am in favor of that. I had one of my best friends, I was the best man at his wedding, was a Chicago policeman for 40 years. He retired. We would argue about these things, police violence and this and that and that. He trained police. He always would defend the police. At the end of the day, I asked him, man, you in the worst neighborhood in Chicago, how many black people have you killed in your 40 years of doing this? He said, I haven't killed none. I said, why? He said, I didn't want to kill none. And we both started laughing. But I'm just saying it. But I want to also say that that's not every policeman on the force. See, it's like, it's when you can't have a nuanced conversation, it's like you in your house with your husband that you hate, or your wife that you hate. And because I grew up with a lot of little contention in my house, I'm sensitive to it. Once it's like once the feeling is so high and you're so justifiably angry, man, you can't, so this guy was we've been friends long before Black Lives Matter. So when I say Black Lives Matters, I'm making a joke on like black people, the way we put an S on the end of everything, but I'm also saying all of these matters. Black lives matters, all the matters, because the racism and the prejudice, it is systemic.
Okay, sure.
And it is a drag, and it has destroyed the potential of this country. Racism cost the United States of America a lot.
A lot.
I'm not going to sit up and have these arguments about do we have racism. I'm from Kenner, Louisiana, Breaux Bridge, Lil Farms.
Sure.
I don't need to read books or hear people in university tell me what it's like to be in this system.
Sure.
So I'm anything that is in favor of changing these things. Yes. And it's so pervasive that everything helps. It's like picking up trash on the street. If you see trash, pick it up. So whatever it is you're doing, if it's Black Lives Matter is your slogan, because I was alive when "We Shall Overcome" was the slogan. So I want to make that clear, because I have a nuanced and informed point of view about Afro-American music. Does not mean I'm in some camp of them that's against black folks. I will never be in that.
Now, who said that? Nobody said that.
No. I mean, I told you got to be careful whenever you say anything out here.
Right. Sure.
Man,
sure.
This is not a time for talking about nothing.
Right.
Almost is not a time even for meeting people. Like if you know a person that has a view different from yours, you could be censured by people. It
Sure,
can be somebody you don't even know. You
sure,
you
sure,
did this thing and you said this about these people. I said, wait a second,
sure. Well, I'm glad we talked about the Anglo-Celtic. I would, if you are open to it, I'd like to talk to you more because when you said,
Sure,
when I heard that, I was like, oh, wait a minute.
sure.
It was definitely shocking. And you're right. It is a decent thing to give people the benefit of the doubt, ask them what they mean. So we have some questions from our audience members, but I have one more. We
But
will come back.
what's one thing I want to say about our racism, if I can.
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, it's just if you don't mind, but I don't want to cut you off.
No, no,
Maya, I
no,
told you
sir.
if I was cutting you off to stop me.
No, you say. People want to hear what you have to say. What do you mean by our racism? What do you want to say about it?
Like the racism that's in our country is just deep in the roots of our people. Okay,
Who is our?
the United States of America, all of us. It's racism is a part of our life. It's a part of me. I'm not saying it's hard for somebody without agency to extend the type of joyous subjugation of somebody
Right. Because racism is about
because
power.
they don't have the agency. But you can also participate in your subjugation by tolerating it. Frederick Douglass observed that in his first book. So I leave that to people to read and come to their own conclusions. But
Mm-hmm.
it has scarred our Constitution. You
Certainly.
mentioned it earlier. Okay,
Certainly.
the fights against it matured our legal system because people fought against racism
Yes.
through the 20th century. A lot of legal decisions were made that were definitely against continuing to have a racist country. Let's just
Yes.
start with Brown versus the Board of Education. They
Yes.
did not know that people would shut down school systems. By 1961, we're not going to have any school to not have black people in it. However,
Or start their own schools
or
illegally.
private schools, all of these things have happened. However, Brown versus the Board of Education is still a reality. Don't throw
Yes.
that reality out because
Yes.
you're mad because some people want to cling on to what they had.
Yeah.
Racism has ruined our modern relationship to justice and incarceration.
Sure.
Now people just put in jail because they got weed in their pocket for 35 years. It's ridiculous. It's
Wow.
tarnished our entertainment industry with all kinds of stereotypes, gangsterism, misogyny, and absolute foolishness that no other group of people in the world would be entertained by. It has
Mm.
caused philosophical and spiritual imbalances that have undermined our ability to reason as a nation. So much so that if you even introduce reason to a lot of this stuff, look, man, don't reason with me. I got to have anti-reason. Like you have a group called anti-fascists and people are against them. How you
Mhm.
going to be against? How you going to be against a group that's against fascism in a democracy? But
Because those groups have been encoded with a certain kind of uh, have been encoded with blackness and encoded against a colonial identity that people want to
okay,
maintain.
whatever reason, I'm explaining to you what racism has done.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
it is undermined our ability as a nation to reason. I'm a citizen of the United States. I'm not going to just throw away all of what my ancestors struggled and fought for,
Hmm.
white and black ancestors. I'm not throwing it all away just to accept some kind of name. I did that up until the time I was like 21.
What do
Okay,
you mean accept some
I
kind of
mean I
name?
accepted all of that. I'm black, and the black nation and white folks that no, that this United States of America. I used to say, how am I gonna be a minority in my country? I'm American. I'm not going to just give you that I'm a minority in my country.
Okay.
Is a French person a minority in France? Is a Russian a minority in Russia? No, I'm not going to accept it. Doesn't mean I can stop other people from accepting it. I'm telling you how I feel about it. And when I speak, when I say our, that's what I'm speaking. That's the perspective I speak from. I
Okay.
don't require other people to speak from it. We're all different.
Okay.
So, racism trashed our public education system. We just
Sure.
talked about it.
Sure.
It was used to create and maintain an exploited underclass. And then just think about it. And the existence of that underclass fosters crime and pathology. Then we made fun of it, had people sing and dance about it. It's
Right.
crazy.
Right.
And then it has compromised the integrity of faith and the principles of democracy. And you've got to believe in these things for them to be real, because the history of the world does not make you want to believe in it.
Hmm.
It created a false mythology that doesn't harmonize with the realities of how we live. And it
Hmm.
makes us gullible and makes us prone to accept absolute nonsense on both sides. Yes, racism costs the United States a hell of a lot. And
Hmm.
it is very present and it's unbelievably real. And
Well,
I'm sorry.
no,
Okay.
no, the things that you're talking about, some, I think I just heard you mention minstrelsy and how it kind of feeds into this idea of black pathology or white goodness, and some people really do cling to those and can't seem to discern, you know, what is minstrelsy, what is not, who's the audience for, these different these images and other narratives. So I think that those are very valid points. Now that we have a question, and it's a question I was going to ask you anyway. There are some folks, and I want to know, your idea about the connection between jazz and democracy.
Okay.
What
Well,
connections do you see?
first, every song can be amended.
Okay, all
So
right.
that's number one. The second thing is the division of power. You have
Mm,
three branches, right, with different functions. The judicial branch is the final word from a legal standpoint on things, and it constrains the power of the president. That's what it's supposed to do.
okay,
I'm telling you, I'm not accounting for corruption.
okay,
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 because so the bass performs that function in jazz. It defines the lower harmony.
okay.
It is the integrity of the beat because drummers have all the power in terms
Mhm.
of volume. The bass is the bottom, the lower part of the integrity of the beat. The bass player holds the chords and things down. The foundation of everything is the bass. The bass plays an A, that's the chord you're playing.
Right.
Anything else can be on top of it. The bass plays an F, you play an F chord.
Mhm,
That's what it is.
mhm,
The piano is like the Congress.
mhm.
It has
Okay,
all the keys. It has
okay.
all the people. It represents everything. Piano's in the rhythm section. Piano's a soloist. Piano is in all of the business. Piano can play by itself. It can play in the context of the rhythm section. The drum is the president. Quick power. Can make very unintelligent decisions or great decisions. The saying in jazz is always the drummer must be kind. You
Mm,
talk about Max Roach, one of the most intelligent, tasteful, unbelievably inventive masters of playing an arrangement because he knew how to play at all volumes, had absolute control of all limbs. Now let's think about what the drums has to do. It's like what a president should do. The drums has to use different limbs to play different functions of many different instruments that are made into one, e pluribus unum. So in the drums, you have a bass drum different from the sock cymbal, different from the ride cymbal, different from when you're playing with brushes, different from when you're playing the crash cymbal, different from how you play snare drum, bass drum, dialogue. And while the drummer is doing all of that, conducting the band, playing brass hits on the snare drum, putting the thunder and power under the whole ensemble with the crash cymbal and the bass drum, that bass drum is playing on all four beats unbelievably softly to match with the bass.
mhm,
So the loudest instrument has to play with the softest instrument because the bass is the softest. The
mm,
loudest instrument has to play the cymbal, which is the highest pitch on the bandstand, on every beat with the lowest pitch, which is what the bass is playing. So
mhm.
you have that same type of agency sharing thing that you have in a democracy. It's different avenues of power, and each one constrains the other. Now, with corruption, it doesn't have to be like that.
Mhm.
The drummer can come in the bandstand and just none of y'all gonna be heard tonight.
Change the tempo. All
Or
yeah,
whatever,
certainly,
play
certainly.
loud. And the bass player can come in now with an amp. And I mean, hey, it's not the softest instrument now. A one horn soloist can stand up. I've sat in jam sessions and seen like four horn players play one song for 40 minutes.
Mm,
Just we
mhm,
can solo long as we want.
mhm.
Democracy. The rhythm section start laying out. And you know what? Almost always is the last person playing when that happens. In a rhythm section, one person will keep playing no matter who plays. And that is the drums.
Mm,
The bass players, after a certain point, okay, y'all want to play all night. Y'all got it. Piano
okay,
players been left out because you can't hear them.
okay.
But drummers, because they can play louder than everybody else, they just get happy.
So I'm hearing it's definitely a metaphor, creative, metaphor. I want to know, and we talked about this earlier in our like kind of warm up early in the week. But I want to just read Max Roach and his take on jazz and democracy. I'll just read a whole quote. He says, "This is talking about the music of African Americans, the music of the 20th century," and he kind of compares it to the European classical tradition. Music of Beethoven and Vivaldi, that music is dead. Plus, it's imperialistic. This music that we deal with is very democratic. It's collective creativity. And he goes on to, talk the imperialistic elements of their music is that there are two people controlling everything. That's the composer and the conductor. The composer is like the whole king and queen thing. And there you have hundreds of musicians and 200 voices to do the Handel piece every year. He gives an example. That stuff is imperialistic. The chorus, the whole orchestra, they're the serfs. These people are like the slaves. They just do the bidding of the one person who has written it and this conductor who is the driving man, so to speak. But the music that came out of this country, he goes into, he says, when I'm hired, they ask, hey, Max, who is with you? Even though it's my band, I may just introduce an idea, but everybody in my band has to be able to create and build upon it. Reference John Coltrane. John was the focal point, but his sound could only have happened with the contributions and creativity of Elvin Jones, McCoy Tyner, Jimmy Garrison. Miles, the same thing. And he says, I wish this country would copy and deal with themselves like we have brought this music. We exemplify democracy. And he cites that kind of creative, collective creativity. He says it's been like that in Africa. It comes from communalism. And then he talks about, he goes on to talk about Jomo Kenyatta's work. So what's your response to the Max Roach's idea of jazz and democracy?
I agree with Max's assessment of what the music is. I don't agree with his understanding of European music, which I know he played because I know people who were in rehearsals with him when he was playing timpani at the Manhattan School of Music. So, you know, I think it's hard to get 70 people, 65 people to play in a certain framework. But he's not, it's not, I disagree with his take on what European music is, but I agree with what he's saying about what the capabilities that exist in jazz. And that's what I think about it.
Okay. We have a few more questions. Let me just get to, well, I'll ask, somebody asked about hip hop and rap, but I want to ask about this first. The ballot box bounce piece. I hear a lot of joy, in that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I hear a lot of joy. But it's interesting, a joy. And you said a lot of people struggle for enfranchisement in this country. And I'm gonna, and folks, get ready for the charge question. If I step on your toe, I'm sorry. This concert was recorded September 27th before the presidential election. Yesterday, Saturday, November 13th, far-right groups and white nationalist groups and other Trump voters and their counterparts held a Million MAGA march in D.C., making claims, unsubstantiated claims that fraudulent votes were cast in favor of Joe Biden, therefore making the Biden win illegitimate. The votes they call fraudulent are mostly of African Americans and Latinos. What are your thoughts on this what's happening now in connection to the song Ballot Box Bounce?
Well, that's why the song was happy. I spoke on it before what happened. I'm still happy. When I listen to the response of all these regular citizens who work in these states, they're like, these elections are controlled by states and they're run through a registry. Sure. It's hard to commit voter fraud.
Sure.
A vote is lined up with a person. And the states are all, every time I see a regular citizen, there's not a politician talk about them doing their job, I just want to hug them and kiss them. Stacey Abrams, I want to hug her. It's not going to be as easy to overturn these votes as you think. Sure. So it's their right. This is a democracy. They want to fight for their way of life. It's their right to do that. No one way you don't have the right to fight for. Only I have my right because I know you have your right. But I think in this instance, that song is happy because I could see what was going to happen with y'all. You weren't going to win this one. It's just, and you didn't.
Right.
Now it's you're fighting, you're doing everything you can to subvert democracy,
sure.
Which is okay. It's like I always say, I don't see a doctor come into a town full of a region full of malaria, and they look at the malaria and looks at y'all and say, man, it's a lot of malaria in here. You the doctor. Yeah, it's malaria. Like this stuff has to be fought against. So that's why I was happy about it. The ballot boxes are bouncing, but the system is a certain way. You can move all the mailboxes you want. You're unsophisticated in your understanding of how the registry works in voting. And if you understood that, and you understood, you're not even picking the right thing to attack. You're attacking the wrong thing.
Yet there were thousands.
Hey, am I gonna, now I have to control who can respond in the way they do? Man, I got my hands full if I'm telling everybody I'm saying something and you better be quiet because I know I'm right. This is democracy. Fight for it. Get your thousands out. Get your millions out. And we had 75 million, 76. They voted. Sure. Okay. And they spoke. And that was it. So the fact that 1 million or 5 million or 10 million of the 75. I'm mad when the Saints lose games. But you know what? Somebody else is very happy.
Right. Right.
So
Okay.
that's
Okay. That I thought that was a timely piece and a timely, question to ask considering the outrageousness of it all.
it was before time. It
Yes,
was
sir.
before time.
Yes, yes. Okay, so now we have a pre-submitted question, and I think you will enjoy this one very much. How do you think jazz is relevant to society today? This is coming from one of the audience members. When music forms such as hip hop seem to be more in tune with the spirit of the times.
Well, things that are popular have always been popular.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not like there's a time in the we mentioned Beethoven's name. I hope nobody thinks Beethoven's music was popular in 1807.
Well, no, it seems to be there was a complicated way of how he was canonized by later scholars.
Well, that's right.
Right.
Okay. However, he was canonized. Let me tell you, as a musician, I don't know how complicated it is, but if you're a musician and you write music or you play, check out some of his music. You're gonna understand. I don't care how complicated you think it is. Once you get into what he actually did, he didn't have anything to do with any of that.
Mm-hmm.
You left doing this. Play that
Mm-hmm.
modulation again. Damn, what is
Sure.
the counterpoint he wrote in that opus? That F major 135. Like sometimes we get all involved in like it's too much. It's a lot of talking going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I can
Mm-hmm.
talk forever, but the counterpoint and stuff, and Beethoven dealt with what he dealt with.
Well, let me ask, so then let's press into this question that I know that you have some serious views on, as we all do. What is your answer to this person's question about jazz and its relevance to society today, which I think we've been talking about, for most of our conversation? When such forms, why do you think this person seems to think that hip hop is more in tune with the spirit of the times? Or
It's
what's your
popular.
response? Okay.
It's popular, and they've been told that over and over again. Here's the point I like to make. In 1976, I was 15. I'm gonna give you my schedule in a week.
Okay.
On Monday, I played orchestra music with the New Orleans Civic Orchestra. The only reason I played it because the other trumpet player was the only other brother in the orchestra, and he told me, "Man, I'm the only brother down there. Come down here and play." And that's how I actually encountered Beethoven's music in an orchestra setting. I really only went to the rehearsal place, the Jewish Community Center, to play basketball, because brothers would get in there and play ball. And I had gone to high school next to that building, and I wasn't gonna go because it's Monday Night Football. I said, "Man, I'm not coming down there." But I was 14 when he first called me. I said, I'm not coming down. He said, "The weatherman is playing Timpani." Now we loved our weatherman. So I said, "Wait a second, I'm gonna go down to the rehearsal just to see if the weatherman is playing Timpani, because it's a community orchestra."
Okay.
Damn, the weatherman was playing Timpani. So I did that on Monday. On Tuesday, I played in a band of older white musicians, who many of whom were veterans of World War II, who were band directors, because my band director, who was Armenian and was always talking about what the Turks did to Armenians, so he didn't want to hear about black and white folks, because at that time, that's all I ever talked about, asked me, "Can you go do this rehearsal, because we don't have trumpet players?" And I truly didn't want to do that. But I said, "Okay, I want to do it." We mainly played Philip Sousa marches and stuff. I learned a lot playing with them. Much as I didn't want to do it, so that was a Tuesday night. He had to go down there. Wednesday, I played with a jazz band of all college age kids, white and black, largely white, playing like Chick Corea's music, kind of the music, jazz music at that time, Letha and those kind of songs, Freedom Jazz Dance, Eddie Harris, stuff we played in the 70s, Herbie Hancock, Maiden Voyage. That was Wednesday night. Thursday through Sunday, I played in the funk band. We had big afros, we had dance steps, we sang lyrics. It was the OJs, the Commodores, the Ohio Players, Earth, Wind and Fire, Parliament Funkadelic. No, that was basically what my weeks were.
Okay.
Was I less of myself, less modern, less whatever, when I wasn't playing Earth, Wind and Fire's music? My daddy was playing gigs the whole time with people like Sonny Stitt, or when they would come in town. Was his music not relevant because he wasn't playing Earth, Wind and Fire's music? So the only thing that's relevant is what's relevant to a group of teenagers or older now. Who had more people? Yeah.
Sure.
There's no comparison between the people we had on the funk gig. In any, you could take all of my father's gigs I saw from the time I was 2, and you could fit his entire audience on every gig into any weekend of gigs we played in the 1970s of playing pop music. Sure. Does that make his music irrelevant? Does that make Duke Ellington irrelevant? No, it depends on how close you are as a people to your fundamental mythology. I
Mm.
told you in America, everything is commercial. So if you're in a downward trend of commercialism, the only thing that's important is what makes money.
Sure, sure. And there have been, some even efforts in Black music seriously dedicated, to that, to churning out commercial
Well, there you
uh,
go.
music, and
There you go. That's
okay,
that's what I
okay,
think about it.
yes,
It
okay,
don't mean I didn't enjoy playing funk. I enjoyed it. I had a great time.
sure,
I mean, it
sure,
wasn't hard to play, but it was fun,
sure,
you
sure.
know. So I don't, but also don't have to say something bad about funk. I don't have to denigrate it. Now I'm gonna say this: we wasn't using all that profanity and talking bad about women and all that. If you'd have told us on
Right,
any gig this was gonna happen,
right.
we'd have slapped your great grandma in the face and called you a lie.
So then, what in the
None of us could
world?
see that.
What
Not
has
one of us
what?
could see it.
Why has this? What, in your view? I just want to press into that because I am equally disturbed. I'm sure as many are. I'm not one of the folks who rationalizes all that. What in the world has happened? Why has
It's
that become popular music too? And it's not only denigrating women; it's denigrating Black women. So I'm just wondering your thoughts on that.
I'm gonna tell you what my mama said because my mom was always outspoken. Now my mama come from the Saint Bernard Project. She was not raised with her father,
Mm,
and she had a very very rough upbringing. And she was extremely intelligent and outspoken. And she didn't give a damn what anybody thought. But I have
mhm,
to always tell people, look, don't come up to my mama like it's some Aunt Jemima, or you're gonna have a colored experience because she's not. She's gonna give you another experience you're not gonna like. So
mhm,
she loved. My mama hated those pimp movies we would go see in the 70s.
mhm, mhm,
Man, I have to tell my mama to tone it down. You know what? Some of my friends would be in that. Oh man, she would go in that thing against these pimp movies, out of Mac, Superfly, and all these movies. She hated. Oh, she talked about pimps and how low down and what kind of hero is that for y'all to have? Y'all better
mhm,
not come in here talking all this. And I don't wear no curtains, all this ignorant boy. My mom was, so they knew don't play with her.
mhm,
She fell in love with Tupac Shakur, but she
mhm,
wasn't following the music. She just loved. Oh, I love this little cute boy Tupac. I just love him. Oh, I love Tupac. I love Tupac. I said, okay, if you really listen to his music, I knew she had listened to it.
mhm,
I said, I'm gonna suggest some music for you to listen to. So I suggested some things for her to listen to, and she listened to it. My mama called me. Whenever she had something to say, she would talk to you like she was gonna tell you a secret. She said, "Oh, Wynton." She called me Wynton. "Oh, Wynton." I said, "Yeah, mama." "Well, child, I listened to that little cute boy with his little old nasty mouth." She said, "They're gonna get unlimited resources now." She understood the equation.
mm,
The culture can get behind a menstrual image, or they can get behind that. And when I say the culture, I
mhm.
mean the entire power structure.
Sure, sure,
The whole white image of what Black people are in a generic sense is 100% behind that. And guess
sure.
who's coming right after that power structure?
Cool.
All the people themselves who also want to be winners.
Mm,
Boy, you never saw so many Golden State Warriors fans. Ain't
mhm,
nobody ever root for Golden State till Steph Curry and them start winning.
mm,
Who rooted for the New England Patriots? Nobody.
mhm,
They were
mhm,
the only team the New Orleans Saints could beat in the 1970s. Now there's a whole nation, Patriot Nation,
okay.
people. So, it's inexplicable how in the modern times this ended up. And a million times when I say it, I have to say not all of it. It's ridiculous to say that
Right.
because obviously not all. If you have to say qualify every time you say women or men or boys or Blacks or white, you obviously don't mean all. It's like when I say the root of Afro-American music is Anglo-Celtic. How am I leaving out the Africans? Like that's,
I,
I mean, you know what I'm saying? But I mean, I guess you can't assume nothing because when you get in a thing with this language, every time, every twist of the word.
well, let's press into that real quickly. We'll leap to something else. The reason why it did seem as if you were saying that is because you were in the conversation with another musician who was advocating for or who was arguing for the music to be called African or thought of as African. So I think that there seemed to be kind of a nemesis thing going on.
Well,
You
there is
know,
because I think that we're denigrating African music when we say that. We're influenced by African music. Their music is hard.
yeah,
Man, I'm not gonna put these people's music. I've tried to play it.
sure.
And Yakub and the people, the
You have to.
African masters I learned from told me,
Yeah, everything is a tutelage. It's a
you
lineage.
know,
You have to
let me tell you,
study.
I studied it, man, and I'm still just as far away from learning it as I was when I first tried to learn it.
Sure.
Man, that stuff they're dealing with is, ooh.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
better,
No,
you gotta show some respect to that.
no
Never just
question.
put your name on my stuff like without, man, come on.
Yeah,
I
that's
got my own name. I'm happy with my name.
well, I mean, some might argue that, but some, like Dr. Nkecha, who's another ethnomusicologist, who does see all diasporic musics as an extension or a part of the continuum of Africa. So, I mean, we
But
can,
I agree with that. Wait, I'm not counterstating that.
yeah.
All people come from Africa.
Well,
All
that,
music is an extension of African music. If you go into that African 6/8, you could go all up in the Eastern music. You can go into Middle Eastern music. You can go into Scottish music, Irish music. You're gonna find that African 6/4 relationship in all music. That's the thing. There's a constant, and you're gonna find that pentatonic relationship that also comes from Africa in all musics.
mm.
You're gonna find it. All you gotta do is look for it.
Well, I know that I mean, yes, sir. I think that is something that is up for debate. The
I don't know who's
idea
gonna debate that.
of all music being African, all people being African, when
Derived. Derived come from.
perhaps,
Perhaps
or
the science is
perhaps
telling,
not.
except for
You know.
Basque people and maybe the Vikings. They still
Well, okay. If we think about it in this way, we think about music as culture, and then culture is derived from labor and land, and so not all lands are the same, and so not all places are the same, not all
right.
So I think that there's going to be that of course is people can dedicate a whole dissertation
But
to that.
let me make this point. They are
Yeah.
different, but they are the same.
Well, okay. I respectfully disagree.
Okay. I'm not mad at you. I love that you're doing that. Maya, that's my I, I don't teach that there's only one way. There are many ways.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's not only one way. That's my way of looking at it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay.
Yes.
Now we have another question I don't want to ignore. And folks who are tuning in, thank you for staying with us. We have another question, and it's something from they want to know from you. Wynton, what are you most hopeful about, and what are you most concerned about? Now, I know we've heard lots of your hopes and concerns, but if there's something that you wanted to explicitly direct to that question, we'd love to hear from you on that.
Well, I want to say that Maya is an example of what I'm hopeful about. Y'all might think we disagree, but we don't. I heard her when she was a young woman in high school. And I love her. And I love the fact that she has things that she studies and that she believes in. And I love the way I love the way she's coming at me with her beliefs. Okay, y'all, so I'm just gonna let y'all in on that. And then when I see her, when she's saying, and look, let me tell you, if my mom was still alive and she heard you, she'd be like, I agree with her 1,000%. Boy, why you keep talking and don't know what you're talking about? So it's a continuum. And so yeah, I'm hopeful. I never suffered from morale because I grew up under such prejudice and so much unbelievable ignorance, and it affected me in such a negative way. And I don't talk about it a lot because I don't want to seem like I'm whining. So I don't. I mean, my history is not about whining about the South and what it was and stuff that happened to us. And because my dad used to always say, man, you should have saw what we dealt with. Or, I mean, we could go on and on with that. Out tragicking the next person. So I think that I have unbelievable faith in the process of engagement, and that we have to be engaged. And that's why my music, I always believe in that optimism, because once you lose the optimism and the belief, you don't have anything else. Then you're only looking at the trash that's in the street. And I that's not what I believe in. I believe that we're gonna rise up eventually, and we're gonna rise to the level of engagement our ancestors had, the best of them, black and white. White folks sacrifice in this country too for equality. I'm not gonna throw them out. And when I see what people did around the world for George Floyd, and it wasn't because most people don't know who George Floyd is. They don't really know the particulars of that situation, but they understand what oppression does. And they say the United States is supposed to be the place that is against oppression. And we are being oppressed. So we identify with this, and we shall overcome. Black Lives Matter, right? It's like all of that, the kind of ongoing march. And I'm hopeful that, hey, our education systems will become better. We will understand what civics is about, but it's going to take all of us fighting. And I believe in it. I believe in that level of engagement, and I believe it will be rewarded because we're not still on plantations. Okay, there's still problems, yeah, But anybody who said we like slaves now, they don't know what slavery was about. I'm gonna direct them back to Mr. Douglas's documents, or
Yes,
Mr. Northup, or any of these people's, any of the slave narratives. Read them and
sure,
acquaint yourself with what was going on. And
sure.
I can tell you that just coming from my daddy's life and what he told me about him dealing with, now he didn't have as much engagement with that racism as I had because he was segregated.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
want to clarify that one misconception, because somebody was born in 1934,
Mm-hmm.
they lived in their environment. Now, if you were born in 1961, you got you a good dose of something that was an experiment that ultimately failed for that period.
Mm-hmm.
It will come around again. That's another one of my movements. It come around again.
And it will come around again, as in what?
Brown versus the Board of Education will come around again. Integration will come around again. American identity will come around again. Jazz will come around again. We live in cycles. Things will come around again. And the next time, people will maybe make a different decision.
You know, and it seems like we are back in a cycle. I've been waiting for this time all my life, really. You know, this anti-racist movement that I, spent time growing up. Like, where is the civil rights movement? When is it going to happen? You know, there's still, and when Trayvon Martin was killed, and these killings that happened, and thank God, for the protesters. I want to ask. I have two questions about that. It will come around again. We're in a cycle. Did you watch the George Floyd video?
I watch all of that.
How did you feel?
The same way when I saw Rodney King, or the same way I felt. You got to remember where I'm from. I didn't first. I don't need to see a video of nobody getting their behind whipped by people who can whip it. I felt that way. It's tragedy when it's just sanctioned violence force. But I've also seen grown men whip people's ass in the street too. It didn't have nothing to do with police. And shoot and kill old people. I've seen all kind of stuff.
Yes,
okay?
sir.
I mean, it's so I'm not gonna. Yeah, I felt like any human being with feeling would feel about it.
And we, of course, we're not minimizing all violence that happens to others, but you did say a very key point: state sanctioned violence. People,
yeah, you can't.
Who are paid by the state.
You cannot have your municipal violence group, or it's like you can't turn your military on your population. The population is not going to win. Like you can't.
Sure.
So it's a taboo, and we've allowed it for poor people and for Black people.
Sure.
Really for Black folks. And you can go into areas where there are only Black people, only Black cops. You're gonna see a similar thing goes on. It's just not people are not as, you're not gonna get as much publicity over it. But if you actually did the work of pulling all the logs out, you'd be like, And this country and this culture requires us to be more acute and to study more and to get more actual information, because this is so much feeling over fact that you can't even make a fact. You got to just get swept up in the emotion and the craziness. That's why I'm always saying, I saw this. We've been seeing this. This is America. This is a battle and a struggle. I'm born in 1961. I wasn't born yesterday.
But it's interesting. We have seen this, as Afro descendants and other people who want to see. But it's very easy when somebody lives in kind of an isolated bubble with only people like them, for them not to see, and all of a sudden something that gets publicized like a George Floyd murder is a surprise. It's no surprise, to
was
us.
People surprised by Rodney King?
Oh, because of the video?
I mean, the video was what it was. And what I thought when
I remember
video,
I had never seen anything like it.
When I saw that video, I thought, damn, a human being is much more durable than you think if you're not shooting them.
That's a terrible thing.
Okay, it's terrible, but I'm telling you how I looked at it.
Sure.
Because for me, the fact of violence, I mean, hey, okay, that's if you grow up a certain way, it's violence.
Yeah.
Like that's what goes on. But I feel like if I have to go back to what we were talking about before, I'm gonna say it again. We need to define ourselves by our largest group. And I want to see a time when Black people are incensed by white people's violence against themselves. Like I noticed, to go back to Beethoven, it was Beethoven's 175th birthday or something, and people are always calling me. Several groups of people called me to talk about Beethoven, but it's always about something about Beethoven's relationship to Black people. And I always say, look, I studied Beethoven, having nothing to do with Black people. Is my opinion of value about who Beethoven was as a composer?
Sure.
So it's like when I start to see Afro-Americans fighting for the rights of people, we're going to understand our value out here, because we represent people, and people all over the world are reaching for us and saying, hey, it's people in Poland. looking at us saying, man, these people in this struggle. It's people in Czech Republic. It's people in Soviet. It's people everywhere.
Well,
So
and what do you think about those alliances that African Americans have formed with, I heard this phrase over and over again, the brothers and sisters in South Africa, or our Native American brothers, or even the people who are being targeted as so-called immigrants, and there seems to be some alliances there. That's my response to
I like
that.
all of it. I like all of that, but I don't leave your white brothers and sisters out.
Well,
They
no, certainly
sacrifice
not.
their lives too.
Well, yes.
That's what my daddy would always tell me. Hey, bro. He call you when he's mad at you. He call you bro. He said, "Look, bro. The only we I recognize is who shows up to solve a problem with me. That's
Sure.
we."
Okay.
So my thing is, don't go for the cheap thrill of a kind of sectarian tribalism. Don't go for that cheap thrill, because that's going to leave you dissatisfied at the end.
Sectarian tribalism.
Yeah.
Uh,
Don't go for the cheap thrill.
And when you mean by that, because that's another kind of loaded term, and you mean by like kind of a us versus them kind of thing? Are you talking about like what do you mean?
Okay, I don't know how academics use these terms. So if I'm telling you, I can't keep up with all the terms. Now they say don't call people he or she, call them they. Okay, I'm not trying to insult anybody, but I grew up my whole life. It comes from my she. Now I have to adjust to call a human being every time I look at them. And I'm not against any of the changes we have to make to make stuff more equitable. But at a certain point of speaking, it becomes impossible for you to know all the most contemporary terms. I referred to a person in a master class as she. And I said, it's like a romantic dance between a man and a woman. And the students start booing. I said, man, I'm born in 1961. Like I want to adjust with y'all. But I mean, damn. So, okay, I understand. Because what happens then is the language becomes the issue and not the idea.
Your intention, exactly what you're trying to
my
say.
intention is not to disrespect any person. It's to tell every person that you have a group of people out there who will work with you to achieve equality. That group does not fall into a sect or a tribe. It cuts across the entire universe. You saw it, and people feeling compelled to talk about George Floyd. And you see it in the United States with people of all races saying, hey, we tired of this. Now let's hold us to the fact that we're tired of it, and let's make the type of changes to our systems that we have to make. Let's change the underlying mechanics and make it possible for us to have a much fuller, richer country that does not rely on crushing people to feel good about ourselves.
Sure. And I noticed that we all say we want that, but then there's some folks who just cling to these ideologies that actually do further crushing people. So we have there's work to be done.
Yes.
So now I got to notice that we do have to. I'm enjoying this very much, and I'm sure all of our participants in our audience are enjoying it. Thank you all for tuning in. We have to wrap up, and I just want to know your some final thoughts. Actually, let me ask you this question. This is kind of there seems to be a lineage in your work of commentary at the Octoroon balls. In this house on this morning, blood in the fields, all rise, Congo Square. And then the piece, there was a song we sang at the 2009 Obama inauguration, Listen Up and Hear Me. I don't know the name of the piece, but I remember that song.
Watch out now.
Yeah, and then the Ever Funky Lowdown, and then now the Democracy exclamation point suite. Just if you could wrap up and tell us, me and our audience, what are these? What's the through line here in your work?
I think in Blood on the Fields, I have a line I always like for the man saying, if you see me walking down the street singing, know that I sing a song with soul to be free, which I soon will be. Yes, then always. That's what I think. Because he had to come a long way to want to be free.
He is in.
His name was Jesse. And it's actually in Blood on the Fields. The woman, her name is Leona. That's my grandma's name. She taught him what it meant to be free, even if you was a slave.
Okay.
And at the end, he realizes, he said, when you see me, and he's a very extreme, harsh, angry man,
Mm.
right? Not even that he was against slavery, because he wasn't. I just throw an ideological twist in there on him. He just
Mm.
didn't want to be a slave. He didn't mind her
Interesting.
being one. And she taught him something. And he said, when you see me walking down the street singing, know that I sing a song I know that I sing a song with soul to be free, which I soon will be. Yes, then always. Yes, then always. That's kind of what I don't even know why that line always comes to me. Yes, once this is achieved, it's going to always be that way.
Mm.
We got a
Mhm.
long way to go. I
Mhm.
mean, I'm sure I won't see it. I'm too old at this point. But once we understand something very simple about this, we're not ever going to not understand it.
Mm. Yes. And with each generation, we
Yep,
get further.
we get further.
All right. And so we press on and we encourage our audience members to keep pressing and keep moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Marsalis, for your
You know,
wonderful thoughts.
Maya,
Uh,
thank you. I'm so proud of you. I have nothing but love, and I wish I was there so I could hug you
oh,
with a
thank
respectful
you.
distance. But
Yes, sir.
you know, all right.
I received that hug. I received that hug. Let's see. We have a note. Okay, so okay, got it. So okay, folks, thank you for tuning in. Stay tuned for more from UMass Amherst, our Fine Arts Center, and the wonderful and esteemed Mr. Wynton Marsalis. And we will see you all next time. Thank you.
Got esteem too. Thank you.
Thank you, Wynton Marsalis and the Jazz at Lincoln Center Septet. What an amazing performance. And thank you again, Wynton and Maya, for such a thought provoking post show discussion. If you enjoyed today's presentation, join us for our final event of the fall season on November 22nd at 3 o'clock. We present Sandglass Theater's premiere, Rock the Boat. Thank you again for joining us and have a great afternoon.